nice, more fun topic for me to talk about than some of the more serious things I do, so I enjoy it. So I'm a naturopathic doctor, not an aromatherapist or particularly trained in essential oils, but I'm using my background of knowledge, what I've learned about manufacturing and safety and all those things to try to provide you a talk that's not something you can just Google on the internet. I wanted to give you more than that and to answer a lot of the questions that I find as I'm doing these that consumers have, particularly those who are really eager to learn more about essential oils and are using them, and then they come up against questions or controversies or things that seem confusing. I want to address those, as well as, of course, the fun stuff about what essential oils you might start with and how you can use them. Of course, I'm going to talk about that as well. So a little bit for everybody, hopefully. One mistake we made tonight was copying there's a feedback form and your notes are on the other side of it. And I need the feedback form back, so I apologize about that. But you can, I could suggest you can take a quick photo of the notes. I mean, that part of the notes that I put in there is really essentially most of the stuff that Dr. Google can answer, how to use this essential oil or that essential oil. There is a little part in there about properly and safely diluting your oils that you could jot down or photograph, but sorry about that. And if you don't have a phone, if you're that one or two persons in here, if there's any way I can help you, I definitely will. I did wanted to say, as I always do in the beginning, especially for the essential oil talks, welcome ladies and gentlemen, if there's one, never plural, 1, 2, 3, yes, it's usually one gentleman and many ladies. So, without further ado, we're going to jump into the talk here. If you feel the volume is wavering, feel free to just adjust it. All right. So we're going to start with what are essential oils, because it's not actually obvious. For one, they're actually not essential. I mean, you may love them so much that you say, I can't live without them, but you can. They're not actually essential. The reason they're given that name is because it comes from the word essence, and they're considered to be the essence of the plant. Because if you're walking by a rose garden, you know, that smell is like the soul or the essence of the plant. They're also actually not oils. So they're really named in a strange way. We know they're not an oil because if you put a drop of oil on your hand, you could stand all day and that oil will just stay on your hand. But if you put a drop of essential oil on your hand, it's going to evaporate, which an oil wouldn't do. So it's given that name because it kind of has an oily feel or consistency or look, but it's not. So what they are is it's the volatile component of a plant. So volatile meaning it easily evaporates. And we know that, of course, because one of the reasons that you like them is that we can smell them. They're also, of course, fragrant. So there are many, thousands of plants that are fragrant. Not all plants contain these essential oils, but many do, and you'll know because you walk by them. And this is a really important point, they're concentrated plant extracts. I'm really going to emphasize as we go on with some slides just how concentrated they are. One, so you can appreciate their value if you have to pay a certain amount for a bottle of pure rose oil. We don't carry pure rose oil, but you might pay over $100 for something like that, or maybe $200. And also, just so you can understand from a safety perspective why we really have to honor just how concentrated they are. So if you are holding just some loose herbs in your hand, say lavender in the actual dried herb, on the average, the essential oil is about 75 to 100 times more concentrated than that. So you might have some loose peppermint in your hand and make a tea, but you wouldn't probably take 100 times that and put it into your teacup. Oops, I think I skipped one thing. They're hydrophobic. So essential oils are hydrophobic, which means that they are afraid of water, technically, but they don't mix well with water. So if you ever had a blue chamomile, that's an essential oil that actually has a nice blue tinge, and dropped it into a glass of water, you'll notice that it's just floating on the top and it will not mix into the water. And I'm telling you that as well for safety reasons, which I'll get to. So here we have, if you want to get a pure bottle of rose, a small bottle like that, so it's 5,000 pounds of rose petals for just 1 pound of essential oil. So that's why you won't usually be buying pure rose essential oil. It's very expensive to make. It takes 150 lemons, and we just use the rind to make our lemon essential oil 30 ml bottle. So again, just appreciating that. And this is a very rough estimate, just 1 drop of peppermint essential oil is the same as if you steeped 20 tea bags of peppermint. So I would never say to anybody, because there's essential oils in your tea bag, I'd never say that you have to worry about the safety of using your peppermint tea, because I'm pretty sure that nobody is going to take 20 tea bags and steep them at once and try to drink that, right? But taking 1 drop of essential oil would be the same as doing that, as if you did that essentially. Now, what do essential oils do in nature, other than, obviously they bring us a lot of gifts, but in nature those aromas are very important for the plants, so they help attract certain pollinators, they help deter other plants around them so that they're not taken over by species. So they are important for the plants. In terms of for us, we can use essential oils in so many ways. Sometimes they're spiritual. The effect of an aroma on our brain and on our minds can have a spiritual level, and it can be all the way down to a very physical level. So some people will use them for, like, tea tree oil for acne. And of course, again, looking at the spiritual, not just essential oils, but things like smudging and aromas, that's a very important ritual for Indigenous people in Canada. Who here did not grow up, well, let's say, who here grew up with Vicks Vapor Rub? Everybody, right. So it is, granted, it's got some petrochemicals and questionable ingredients, but it is amazing, right? It is amazing when you rub it on your chest, how it just opens up your respiratory tract. Well, this is essential oil based, eucalyptus and other essential oils. So I always find it incredible. I actually have a bottle like this at home, and it must be about 20 years old, and it still works. It never goes bad. Essential oils have a long history across so many cultures, China and the Middle East and so on. But one of the most relatable, I guess, stories is the 3 wise men, and they brought to baby Jesus the frankincense and myrrh and gold, right? So they gave as much value, I think, to frankincense and myrrh, to essential oils, as they did to gold. So they knew back then that this is fit for a king and that they're so precious. So some safety considerations. I'll start with by saying that just 4 teaspoons of our camphor, so camphor is 1 essential oil, could kill a young child. Like, that's the sort of potency. I don't know how we know that exactly at 4 teaspoons, but trust me, we did not do an experiment. So you want to keep essential oils away from children. Luckily, they're so difficult to get out, those drops, that no child would probably have the patience to kill themselves. They're probably not going to be able to even fill a teaspoon. But nevertheless, just keep them away from children. You want to avoid all the sensitive mucous membranes, the eyes, the cheeks. I'm talking about direct contact, or even just, depending on your sensitivity, nearby. Because I know when I put peppermint on my temples, sometimes I can still feel it burning my eyes. Maybe I'm particularly sensitive. So just be aware of that. You always want to dilute essential oils before putting them on your skin, with one exception, which is lavender. And that's just because lavender just so happens to have properties such that it's safe. If you're really sensitive, you can dilute lavender as well. That's not an issue. But you always want to dilute them. I went into a store. I was in Victoria, BC, doing a talk, and I went into, not a health food store, but a place where they just had essential oils. And I came in and I can't remember what I'd said to just saw the essential oils, and I mentioned something about, I don't know, my arms were hurting or something, and the customer service person said, "Oh, wait," and she ran. She said, and before I could even say anything, she had cinnamon drops on my skin, rubbed it in like that, and within 3 seconds, I was turning red and, yeah, reacted to it. So cinnamon happens to be one essential oil that's particularly harsh on the skin. So just an example of, and I'm not an allergic type person, that you got to be careful what you put on your skin. Rotating essential oils is not a bad idea, especially on the skin. And that's because even if you don't react immediately, you don't have an allergy, and it's properly diluted, there is such a thing called sensitization, where with continued use, you do start to react to something that you didn't before. So if you really love something and you're making your own products, just consider, there's no a golden rule about this many months or that many weeks, but consider rotating a little bit. So not for internal use. This is a kind of tricky thing for consumers. When I say that, what I mean is that our bottles, as they are marketed for you, are not for internal use. They're not made ready to be used for internal use. Of course, essential oils can be ingested, some of them, like peppermint. You have a peppermint chocolate bar with peppermint essential oil. So that's one example you know of. We have a list on our website of essential oils that can be used internally, but that list means that, appropriately diluted, intended for that way, yes, you can ingest them, but some consumers are taking essential oils and dropping them in that concentrated form in a glass of water. And it doesn't matter how big your glass of water can be, this big, because it doesn't mix in water, it's exactly the same when it goes in your mouth and hits your stomach. It's undiluted. And there have been people who have had sort of a hole burned in their stomach from peppermint or other essential oils, admitted to hospital, because every day, and even if it doesn't necessarily, there's no reaction immediately, day after day with that essential oil on your mucous membranes, you're taking a certain risk. So when we use essential oils in our toothpaste, which we do, it's less than 1% of that toothpaste, and it's also diluted in ingredients that are not just water, so it can disperse. It's not just as if you're using the whole tube of toothpaste and then out comes that one drop. So just keep that in mind. Now some people will take essential oils as we make them and then make something in a diluted form and ingest it, but that's up to you. If you know somebody and you trust, you know how to work with them. So you want to spot test new essential oils as well. I know I'm guilty of not doing that. I get a new cosmetic product and I never spot test it and wait 24 hours, but technically you should. Caution when you're diffusing essential oils in small areas, particularly when it comes to pets. So I don't know if anyone here has a bird. Not many people have birds. Anyone have a bird? Okay. You know the story of the canary in the coal mine, or not the story, but they used to use canaries to test whether or not it was safe for people to go in coal mines because they're really bad at detoxifying and they die very quickly. So people can kill a bird by diffusing essential oils in a small room. Cats apparently are not great at detoxifying, so you need to be careful not about using them in the house with the cat, but having them in a room where they cannot exit. Just being sensible. And of course, infants and such. Again, there are no set rules. We don't do studies, diffusing essential oils around babies and see at what point it's toxic. But it's just common sense about small areas and having it right next to somebody. But otherwise, of course, they are generally safe. I'm not trying to scare you. Keeping the lids on, other than a safety factor, is just one of, if you want your essential oils to last, as soon as they're exposed to air and to moisture, they start to deteriorate. So if you're making things, what I do is, I take the lid off, I'll add my 2-3 drops and immediately put the lid back on. Because even in just 5 minutes or 10 minutes without the lids, you're losing some of that quality. And having said that, though, I would never throw away an essential oil if you think that it's deteriorated a little bit, because all of them have some kind of antimicrobial properties. You can use any of them ultimately, I think, to clean your floors and such. So that's always what I do. If I have an essential oil, I no longer want to put it on my skin. When they do deteriorate or oxidize, they're more likely to react with your skin, so just use them on your floors or give them to your neighbor you don't like, something like that. That's something I'm not supposed to say on YouTube. I've already talked about that. So they lose also some of the antibacterial properties as they oxidize, so they may not be as effective to clean your floors, but that's okay. Yeah. All right. So this is just about, this slide is showing that. So we have our essential oils in a form that's intended, again, for things like aromatherapy. But we have peppermint oil in a pill that you can swallow. That is the essential oil. And then again, you can find peppermint essential oil in food. So some people ask the question, is your essential oil food grade? Thus, can I eat it? Or they'll say, I heard that this other company that has essential oils that look like yours, somewhat in a bottle, that you can ingest those ones because they are of a higher or food grade quality. So, whether or not this can be eaten has nothing to do with it being food grade or quality. It has simply to do with the category that it has been put under. So Health Canada only allows any company to use their essential oil in one category, which means this cannot be marketed as food grade or for food, use for food, and use as for aromatherapy. Similarly, peppermint oil, it's a supplement, can't be promoted as a food, and a food can only be a food. So we have to pick one category, and we pick the one that's the most general and broad, because most people are using essential oils for things like diffusing or maybe cleaning their floors. If we were to put it in a different category, more like a supplement, we'd be very restricted in terms of what claims we could make on the bottle, which means when the consumer read that, they would think, oh, well, I can only use this for acne and nothing else because that's what it said on the bottle. And we wanted to leave it flexible. But again, this could be used in the peppermint to make the peppermint because it's not an issue of quality. If we chose to make it in a category of natural health products, which we could, then Health Canada would restrict us to only these claims. Despite any research, despite what anyone says on the internet or any historical uses, we could only use these claims and only the ones that Health Canada approves. So again, it would be restricting, and also it will be very hard for you to read on the bottle. Imagine those on the essential oil. So again, just to bring home the point, so category and quality or purity are unrelated things. Here are some of the many ways that you can use essential oils. Does anyone here have a diffuser? Oh, a lot of you. Wow, okay. I should have asked in the beginning, which I usually do, how many of you say you own 5 or more essential oils? I'll probably get one of you to come up here and do the next half of my talk. So if anybody feels like being on YouTube. So here are the many uses. I just wanted to show you this, just because it's quite common comment that I get is when people cannot say drink their essential oils is that I really want to use it internally. Is it not safe to take internally? To which I say is you're always using them internally, because when you breathe them in, they're going right up to the center part of your brain. That's pretty internal, right? And they're going into your lungs, which they can diffuse into your bloodstream. So we're always using them internally. We just might not be taking them through our mouth, right? And so they do trigger brain centers that are really in primal areas that have to do with our memory and our moods, which is why some people can really be triggered by an aroma in a good way or in a bad way. My interesting story is that I used to have, I don't know if I still do, but I was diagnosed in my 20s. It was like 5 years ago? Yeah. It's so sad that people laugh at that. But I was diagnosed with something called silent epilepsy. I'd never heard of it, which means I actually had no seizures ever. But I just kind of went into a out-of-body sort of state. But that always was preceded with the smell of, and again, it's an age thing, of a slinky. Remember those metallic slinkies? Yeah. So, and then I would go into that state, but it was always triggered by that. It's almost like the smell, even if the slinky wasn't around, which was, for me, very interesting in terms of the power of smell. I had no traumatic experience with the slinky, so I don't know what was going on there. But probably everyone has a story. Sometimes you smell something and it reminds you of something. So that's why essential oils, and there's a lot of studies in terms of how they affect our mood, our brain, and our memories, but I think that they can be really, really powerful. And it's probably quite individual as well. Another thing is just to know that once they go to the brain, they also can trigger the autonomic nervous system, which has far-reaching effects in the body, most of which are not understood in terms of how essential oils work. But that can mean that there can be a cascade where there are many hormones in the body that are triggered. So I think, if we had the money to study essential oils like we do some drugs, we'd probably find a lot of interesting things. And then, of course, they can go into our lungs as well, as I mentioned, and into our bloodstream. And when we put them on our arms, I think is the next, if we put them on your arms, of course, essential oils can be absorbed through the skin. It depends on the essential oil. Some are absorbed more than others. Tea tree oil does not penetrate the skin as much as others. But if we couldn't absorb through our skin, we wouldn't be using the patch and those sort of things as medicines. Now, the details here are not important, but what I wanted to show you here is that there are these chemical components in essential oils that are often common to many different essential oils. So, for example, aldehydes can be found in essential oil melissa, eucalyptus, lemongrass, and it has certain properties, including it happens to be anti-inflammatory. So that's why you'll find, there's many essential oils that seem to have similar properties. And this is, in some ways, it's an advantage because I think people often underutilize their essential oils. They'll think of, lavender is the essential oil to relax me, and tea tree oil is the one that's antimicrobial. But often what you'll find is they have multiple properties, and if you get to know them well, you'll find that you can do a lot with a few essential oils. This is just another example of esters is a chemical component common to lavender, ylang ylang, chamomile, jasmine, and it has parasympathetic properties, which means a relaxing effect on our nervous system. So, and then sort of on and on. Just a little bit about extraction methods, because people ask me questions like, how does the Now brand process their essential oils? And the answer to that, and it'll probably be for any essential oil company, is it really depends on which essential oil we're talking about because of the complex properties. Some are done one way and others another. So most essential oils are made with steam distillation. And if you look on our bottles, it will tell you how it was made. And that means that you just have evaporation of all those volatile components, so the ones that are easily go up into the air. The great thing about that is that things that are not very good at evaporating are heavy metals and also pesticides, so they can be very clean. And actually, it's one of the great things about essential oils is those plants naturally repel pests in many cases and don't require a lot of pesticides. So they tend to be very clean even when they're not organic. Then there are cold-pressed essential oils, and those are usually all of the citrus ones. So they're just usually sort of, as you can imagine, pressing down. The reason that that's important is because they're not evaporating, they're not as clean, and they have some of the waxy or heavier components of a plant, which means if you're using them in your diffuser, they're just more likely to clog it. They're kind of more oily, so you just need to clean your diffuser with alcohol more readily, but they're still great. We have jasmine and rose. Those are technically called absolutes and not essential oils. Because they're so delicate, we cannot make them using steam distillation, or if we did, it would cost you, instead of, I don't know what they are now, a bottle, let's say $30, it would cost you $100 and something, and you'd probably not buy it. So those have to be made with a solvent, and we test when we get the essential oils, we are always testing for those solvents, and again, any company would be using solvents on those too, pretty much. Well, I can't speak for every company in the world, but I think that is the case. And we use carbon dioxide to extract our vanilla. So different processes for different things. Another thing that I wanted to mention is the issue of adulteration, which means the problem of that sometimes lookalikes or those sort of pretenders are added into a bottle, and for most consumers, or even myself, I probably wouldn't know, if you love Lang Lang, which is a great essential oil, here's a list of all the other types of things that companies have been known to, or suppliers, I should say, suppliers, to use instead of in dishonest ways. So they might use just low grades or kind of a fraction of the essential oil. They might use completely synthetic products that smell or somehow act the way that Lang Lang does. So we need to be really mindful of that. This is not a talk about quality, but I should mention that two things. One, that, and I don't know if you know, that the Now brand actually is family owned for the last 50 years. But secondly is that they're quite renowned for their in-house laboratories. Many companies don't have laboratories. That's quite rare. They manufacture and produce many of their own things. They don't actually press the essential oils and such, but their essential oils go through about 15 tests, each and every one of them. And those tests, especially 4 of them, are sort of internationally recognized as ways of identifying and testing for purity. And they're not proprietary tests. Anyone in the essential oil industry who manufactures will understand them. And they're all published on their website, so you, the consumer, you don't have to call in. You can look up any of our essential oils and see a page that shows not only the numbers in terms of those test results, but the actual graphs if you know how to read them. So they're very transparent with those. These are the 4 tests you will find on our website, but again in a more graphic form. So gas chromatography, again, is the main way in which we can identify. It's like a fingerprint to see if we actually have lavender or something that is posing as it. And this is what you'll see on the website, but for each essential oil. And you can print them up. Okay, so one last thing I wanted to say, because if you're really into essential oils, you might have come across someone or somewhere, or maybe just on the internet, somebody saying these essential oils are therapeutic grade. Sounds great, it sounds like it's a higher grade, and there is a term, therapeutic grade. Therapeutic grade means that there's some kind of a government agency or some central body that we all know about that has a very specific description of what therapeutic grade means, and if you meet that, then you're therapeutic grade. But in essential oils in North America, there is no such body. There is no therapeutic grade that exists in terms of definition, and so any use of this word is just a marketing term. It's made up. I could say, you know, this is a Dr. Talia grade essential oil, and it will have the same meaning as therapeutic grade, which is none. So just be mindful of that as a consumer. It still may be great quality, but there's no such thing, no standard. So obviously none of you are starters, I think, because you all raised your hand that you have 4 or more. But these are the essential oils that I'm going to speak about. And if you don't, if you're already using them, but if you don't use them for multiple things, then maybe this will help you just sort of broaden the use of what you already have. And I'm also using them because I've used many of these and I'm familiar with them. So we'll start with lavender. And I'm sure, again, if you have essential oils, who has lavender? Oh, there you go. Almost everybody. There's the odd person who hates lavender, the smell, but most of us like lavender. So what I wanted to say about lavender is that you can think of it, of course we all know it's relaxing, probably its most common use, but for all things skin, I think that's one of its underutilized things. Anything to do with the skin, whether it could be acne or eczema, and I'm not calling it a cure-all for every skin condition, but lavender is amazing and gentle, which makes it great for the skin. Years ago, before I was doing this job, I had burnt my arm. I still have a tiny bit of a scar, and it looked like a 3rd-degree burn, almost a blister, and I think it was starting to ooze a little, so not to disgust you. My family was panicking a bit and saying, you know, you really should go to the doctor, get an antibiotic or something, but I was stubborn. I contacted a herbalist I know that I really, really trust. He seems to know everything and always have great advice, and I said, I've got this 3rd-degree burn, what do you suggest? He said, 100% lavender is the best thing for burns, just put it directly on, and that's what I did, and I never forgot that. And this past summer, I was doing a lot of walking tours in Toronto. I'm very light-skinned. As far as I ever remember, I burn easily. But I would always put a drop or 2 of lavender in some aloe vera gel. And I just went through the whole summer, and I didn't tan much, but I didn't burn. So that was my experience with lavender. So just really think of it as the first aid for skin, or something that you could add to anything that you're making for skin therapeutically, in addition to using it just to relax. So tea tree oil, you probably know it as the antibacterial, antimicrobial, definitely great, I think, for acne. When I was a little bit younger and I'd have a little bit of that premenstrual little outbreak, I really found that tea tree oil worked well. And I wasn't as wise as I am today, so I never diluted it, and I always put it on, and it didn't hurt me, but nevertheless, so everything's not a hard and fast rule. But what you might not know about tea tree oil is that in many European countries, people use tea tree oil much like we use eucalyptus oil to help loosen the mucus in the chest when you have a cold or flu. So if you have tea tree oil but not eucalyptus oil, you could consider using it for that as well. And that's, again, because it shares probably a similar chemical component to eucalyptus oil. What else? So it's a respiratory decongestant. You could combine it with your eucalyptus as well. Peppermint. So peppermint, I'm trying to always get ahead of people and think, like, what would you probably know about peppermint? Maybe it's as a bug repellent or something. That's what most people like, helping with spiders. I tested it out for the first time last summer. I had a centipede come into my living room. I'm terrified of bugs, so for literally 2 days when I was in my bathroom, I won't get into detail, but I wouldn't put my feet down on the ground. That's how afraid I was. And then I saw another one. I got peppermint, and I probably used way more than I needed to, maybe a half a teaspoon. And I cleaned my floors, and I kept doing that every time I cleaned my floors, and I have not seen a centipede again. So that's my story. I did look up the research about peppermint and mice, because I know that some people want to use it for that. And in as much as I could find, the research says that it is a good deterrent for mice to go to an area where they have not yet been. So if they're already in your house, but you haven't found them in this pantry, you might prevent them from going there by putting it there, but it's probably not going to drive them out of your house if they're already in there. It's helpful, but it's not miraculous. You might still have to resort to other things, but definitely if you want to prevent them from going elsewhere. I happen to like mice. I don't have a problem, but I had a pet rat, so mice and rats. We have Roman chamomile. With regards to chamomile, I'd say one of the things I like to point out is that there's over 200 varieties. So when you read about chamomile or any essential oil, especially if it's on a blog or something and it's just very general, just see if you can see the Latin name, because the Latin name of the different species may make a difference in terms of it being as effective as it could be, because there's a variety of different types, just like you have varieties of apples and such. So in this case, I'm just showcasing Roman chamomile. Probably all of the varieties have something in common, but a little bit different. Chamomile, in the essential oil, is often used for many things that it's used in the herb. When it comes to indigestion, I probably prefer just the chamomile tea, but you could dilute it and rub it on the stomach as a way of getting it internally. Actually, chamomile is one of the most undervalued, I think, herbs, because it's just so common that we get so bored of it and we're always looking for the next more exciting thing. But chamomile is a great herb and essential oil. And you can also see for skin, there's so many essential oils that are helpful for skin, or that you would see would be antimicrobial or anti-inflammatory. And I think there's a reason for that. Same with herbs, it seems like everything is anti-inflammatory. And the reason for that is that plants need to fight off diseases too. They need to have their own antimicrobial properties. So it makes sense that probably every plant in the universe, if we look into it and chemically dissect it, has antimicrobial properties. So that's why, again, you can do so many things with your essential oils, and some of which we have probably yet to discover. So we have our eucalyptus. I love eucalyptus. When I practiced as a naturopathic doctor, I didn't use a lot of, or suggest a lot of essential oils because that wasn't my specialty. But eucalyptus was always a mainstay of what I suggested for those who were sick during the winter time. My favorite way to use it if you're sick is not in the diffuser, because diffusers, I think, don't have the same kind of effect as if you put the eucalyptus in a sink of hot water and put a towel over your head, because you're really trapping in those gases, and you can get a lot more than if it's just diffusing into the whole room. Has anyone here used eucalyptus when they were sick for that way? Yeah, it's really great, right? It is best to inhale it for a minute or two, and I find that I was never patient enough to do that. From my experience, just one drop under that towel is more than enough. Anything more, it's very strong. It can burn the eyes, and you always want to be careful with anyone who has asthma, again with young kids. When it comes to diffusing with eucalyptus, what I used to tell my patients is, just in that case, just put it in a pot of water on the ground with a kind of a tent over it, and sit with your kid and hold them. You don't want to have a kid sticking their head under a towel where there's hot water below their nose. Just so you can also see how they're doing, what's the look on their face, do they look like they're gasping, and that. So you just want to be a little cautious with kids. Rosemary. So rosemary has a lot of uses. In cosmetics, you'll see, probably even in here, if you look around, it's probably in a lot of shampoos and things like that. I believe there are studies showing that it is helpful to an extent for hair growth, in helping, in many cases, essential oils that are helpful for hair growth are because of either they're stimulating blood flow, or perhaps just getting rid of things such as maybe bacteria or other things that can kind of clog our pores. So just making the environment more healthy. But if there's complete baldness, I don't think that any of them can produce a regrowth. What else? Respiratory, so rosemary as well can be used like tea tree and eucalyptus, so that I haven't personally tried it. Joint pain, so when it comes to joint pain, essential oils again can be diluted and rubbed over the joints, so you don't have to think about taking it internally. Peppermint actually is great for joint pain. I don't think people use it that much, but in terms of which one is better, often it takes a bit more understanding of that particular essential oil. So peppermint is very cooling. I'm sure you know that. We associate peppermint, peppermint tea, although it's hot in the summer, but to cool down, because it's cooling, so it'd be great for joints that are inflamed. So rheumatoid arthritis, or just something where there's redness or swelling. And then, of course, rosemary is thought of as helpful to stimulate the mind and keep you awake. So when I'm doing, not tonight, I had Earl Grey tea for that, but when I'm at home doing teletrainings in the comfort of my own home, I always put something like rosemary or a combination of other things in the diffuser just to keep me more alert. If you're working long days somewhere, you could get the little diffuser that can attach to your computer with the UPS. Who's nodding? You have one of those. And then you can diffuse that so long as your colleagues don't mind. But you could use it for that. Orange oil. So I love the citrus. I think our most popular blends have citrus in them. It's something about citrus that most consumers love them, and then with other essences, it really depends on the person. They are, though, the citrus oils, all of them to a different extent, are a little more likely to cause that sensitization on the skin. So you've got to be cautious with citrus oils in terms of using them too much, and they can also clog your diffuser if you don't clean them well. So I, other than in a good mixture, I like to use citrus though a lot for making cleaning products. And I mean, they're really great to break through grease, which is why even if you go to ordinary commercial cleaning products, you'll see that citrus is so common. I have at home, I forget the name of the brand, but it's like sort of a pure citrus kind of cleaning product. And it says on it, the skull, caution. I think if you drink that, it can probably kill you. So yeah, citrus is really good for breaking away grease, but cautious on the skin. But enjoy it. And also, so acne, fungal infections, warts, cuts, and boils. I wouldn't be afraid to use citrus for those, but dilute it and just use it more for an acute short term than perhaps daily use on your skin. I'm curious, how many of you use essential oils in your bathtub? Okay, quite a few of you. So how many of you who do have dropped it in the water without diluting it? Oh, okay. How many of you are not going to do that again? Good. So all you have to do is get a tablespoon of oil, any oil. You don't have to go out and buy one. It could be cooking oil, but you might want to have a nicer one. And just put your essential oil drops in that oil so it can disperse in the oil before you put it in the bath. If you've used lavender, you're probably okay. But what generally is happening, if you really looked carefully when you're lying in the bath, is all the essential oils are floating up to the top and they're like sitting right here or wherever the line of the water is, and that's where they could start to irritate. And again, I've done that because, again, I just didn't know, but I think I only had lavender in the days, so I was just lucky. But someone who puts a lot of citrus in their bath I've heard of people burning their skin badly. So this formula that we have called Nature Shield is based on a legend, or maybe some people say it's a true story. It contains cloves, cinnamon, lemon, eucalyptus, and rosemary. And it's one of our most popular combination products that people use for cleaning floors or in their diffusers. Anyway, the story behind these goes way back into the Middle Ages. That's when the bubonic plague, you might have heard of that. It's not one of the plagues affecting us today, but we have our own ones to contend with. But as the story goes, is there were these 4 spice sellers, these 4 men, merchants, and they were selling, and then the bubonic plague broke out, and of course hundreds of thousands of people across Europe were killed by it. Well, they couldn't really sell their spices anymore because the trading paths were broken, there were dead bodies everywhere, and people weren't really in the mood for buying things. So what they did instead was they started looting all these dead bodies and selling the stuff and making a living that way. King heard of this and wasn't so much concerned about the fact that they were robbing people, these sick and dead people, and not die because of this bubonic plague. It's so contagious. The king summoned them and said, "I will let you live if you tell me your secret." And their secret was, they said, that they were eating these spices. In those days, these spices were diffused into a vinegar. So they were not dropping the essential oils. But from that story, and there's variations on it, and even in terms of the essential oils, but a number of companies have made products based on that story, including ours. And so that is the reason why we promote it for cleansing of the air or cleaning the surfaces. And definitely all of these have good antimicrobial properties. It's a lovely formula. I don't recommend it on the skin because cinnamon and cloves are not really conducive to topical. That's one of my favorite formulas. What else? Just a note about making your own products, whether it's a spray for the air or the surface cleaner. Okay, sorry, I think it's on another slide. No, there's your recipe. It's very easy to make cleaning products. here's a recipe, but honestly, I've been using essential oils in my cleaning products for years without ever looking at a recipe. It's pretty safe when it's on your floor, but I haven't had a toddler crawling around on the floor. I probably would be a little more careful if I did, or a pet or something like that. You might want to look then at the doses. I will say that if you're using Pinterest for recipes, just be a little bit cautious. I mean, there's it seems like some of the recipes on there really recommend high doses of essential oils. So I think, there's a lot of good resources on the internet. If you're going to get your information, we have a website full of recipes, but if it's a random blog or something, try to get it from somebody who is a certified aromatherapist, because they tend to understand better how to mix things, just less likely to get in trouble. This is sort of just an idea for recipe with our nature shield. I'm happy to, by the way, at the end, if you want to come up, if there was a slide that you wanted to just come up and photograph, you can do that. But on our website, again, we've got tons of recipes and ideas for all of these things, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. But the essential oils, just wonderful for cleaning surfaces. This is in the notes that you have that you can photograph or write down if you want. I will go back to it at the end so you can jot down so you can relax. But this is the way in which you can dilute your essential oils. You also find on the internet all kinds of the similar information. So if you're going to dilute your essential oils in a 30 ml bottle, which is typically the size of our essential oils, we might have some smaller, which is 1 ounce. What you want to do is stick within this sort of dilution amount. So anywhere between 0.1 to 3% solution. It's not that a seasoned aromatherapist who's really used to working with clients for years and dealing with different complicated therapies, they may go higher, perhaps for some people, for short periods of time, for certain things. But I would caution you not to do that on your own. So 3%, if I'm making my own body products, I usually stick to 3%. If you have sensitive skin, maybe a 1%. So that means just six drops of essential oil in 30 ml of a carrier oil. Carrier oil just means, again, any oil that you want to put on your body, is 1%. If you're a beginner and you're not sure and you don't know if you're sensitive, go lower. For infants, toddlers, pregnant women, and that sort of thing, you want to go into the really, really diluted area. But I would still recommend, if you're pregnant, to get the advice of somebody, because all essential oils are not created alike and are not the same in terms of their safety. Again, we know lavender, you can make tea with it, and a pregnant woman could probably make lavender tea, so they can probably have a very diluted lavender, but there's certain essential oils you might want to be more careful with. So just keep that in mind. Another thing is that I know a lot of people and there's a lot of recipes online, they put the essential oils into water and then, using it as an air freshener or such. But because of what I mentioned, the fact that essential oils don't mix into water, they're always floating on the top and they're not really mixing into it. So you might just be using a lot of it at the end and a little of it throughout. So there's certain hacks that you can use to make it disperse better in water. And so I either look for recipes that have those in them, or I'll just add my own. So vegetable glycerin is very useful. We do sell that. It's not expensive. You can get a bottle of vegetable glycerin. That will help to disperse it. And alcohol. Alcohol will help as well. So isopropyl alcohol is probably your best bet. Vodka, you could use vodka, but apparently it's not great. I'm not sure why, but I spent hours trying to research this particular topic, and there were quite a few people that mentioned specifically isopropyl alcohol. So since that's cheap and readily available at a drugstore, so one or two of those, coconut oil or oil, so it's not water soluble, it's fat soluble, so a little bit of an oil. If you're making products, it's easier to work with these liquid oils than the solid oils like shea butter or such, unless you're going to be melting them. So just make sure again that so if you have a liquid that you use alcohol, vegetable glycerin. Another one that often I see on the internet recommended is witch hazel, but actually witch hazel does not work. It's only because witch hazel usually comes in alcohol base that it works. It's not the witch hazel. So there you go. That took a lot of research too. Again, I never believe something the first time I hear it. I keep looking. So here's a face mist that I just kind of came up with a recipe, and I'm just showing you this again to show that I made sure that I add vegetable glycerin in terms of that. Got to be careful with face mist, of course, but lavender would be probably the safest thing to spray on your face. An idea of how to do the bathtub safely. So 3 to 10 drops of essential oil into a tablespoon of the carrier oil. Again, some experience can be helpful. Maybe not 10 drops of citrus because it's more caustic. So, just always start small and build up. We have a lot of diffusers. This is our newest one, which is more elegant. It's nice glass, which I'm glad that we have. I use this one. It's my favorite, and the reason is because it gives off more mist than they do. So it's almost like a humidifier. It's not technically a humidifier because it's not hot, it's cold mist. But I really like that, and then if I am feeling sick, I can shut my eyes and sort of lean over it and get a decent amount. We have all kinds. This one I think in the dark, can make nice patterns because the light shines through the metal on the wall. Have you ever seen it? Yeah. I don't have one, so I hear about it. Yeah. This is how I start my day, with my morning sunshine. I do not look like that before, but afterwards. Yeah. So I love our morning sunshine. It's one of our best sellers. It has stuff, that kind of peps you up and lifts up your mood. And I know maybe it's half placebo, but it seems to work. This is one of my favorite recipes to make for gifts. So if you're celebrating what's coming up, Christmas or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa, whatever it is, or just life itself, body scrubs are so nice as a gift. So all I do is I take 1 cup of sugar or salt. The salt is a little bit rougher, so it depends on whose skin and where. You don't want to put salt on your face. Sugar is definitely more gentle, but part of it being gentle or not depends on how coarse it is. So what kind of sugar or what kind of salt. But either of those can be used. Half a cup of any oil. And if you are just not in love with a colleague at work, but you have to give them a gift, use grapeseed oil because it's cheaper. Not jojoba. If it's your bestie, use jojoba. Cacao, I love because it gives a beautiful coloring, like nice brown coloring and a nice smell, but it's not an ingredient you have to put in. You simply need sugar and oil to make this. And then, of course, the essential oils, which you can play around with, but lavender is a nice, safe one. So it makes great gifts. You can just buy a bunch of containers. And I love these because after I scrub, you don't have to moisturize because you've already got that oil scrubbed into your skin, so it's nice. This is on our website, so don't worry about it. And I think you have little cards here with the recipes as well. So I think you can take some of these away. Make sure you check somewhere over there. Potty spritz, that's spray into the toilet before you use it for the benefit of those to follow you. So again, we have a few versions of this on our website and cards. This is something I think we also have on our cards, right? Yeah. So this is, it may be a nice gift if you're pretty adventurous, but it's making little, you have to buy the empty tea bags and fill them up with essential oils and magnesium flakes, which are great for relaxing muscles. Again, for the adventurous gift giver. I'm not that adventurous with this. Vapor shower pucks. Again, nice gift ideas. I'm thinking of making them. I haven't yet, but I think that for me the best use would be to prep these with eucalyptus for that inevitable winter week or days when I'm going to be sick, and I want them to be released into the shower. So I think that's a nice, give it to someone, for those sick days. What a nice gift. Everyone's going to get sick, so it will be used. We have all kinds of recipes again on the website, as well as cards of these exact ones. Yes?
Just wanted to ask, can you put those in silicone tins, muffin oil in silicone to bake in the oven rather than metal?
I don't see why not, but then how are you going to, because you take them out of these and put it in the shower in the container to hold on to it. Are your silicone cups separate so you can put one in the shower?
Well, I was just thinking of a silicone mold, like different maybe shapes to put this.
Yeah, if you can, it's not just one single tray stuck together, but separate.
Yes, correct.
I don't see why not.
Okay. But the silicone's okay to mix with the oil, it won't go.
I mean, I've never done any research on silicone and essential oils, so it's possible, I guess, that essential oil could be,
But you don't
with any material might not be stable.
put the
But that's,
essential oils after you bake them. So you don't put them in during the baking process. You just put the baking soda and I don't even know if the whole thing is on there. Those are just some, so you just use the baking.
Right, top with essential oil.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, that's a good point.
Yeah, so you're not.
You can clearly see I've never made them.
I've made them, so yeah.
Okay, then it shouldn't be any
You
issue.
put your
Yeah,
essential
yeah.
oils in basically as you're going into the shower, so that they're in
Yeah.
there and the baking comes out.
If you have any questions at the end, you could also ask me about carrier oils. It's not the topic for today, but certainly like which oils might you want to use when you're making products for different skin types. So on the Now website, we have this is how it looks, a section where you can click on. There's just dozens and dozens of different recipes, including how to make your own perfumes. Oh, we're already at the end.
Wow.
Yeah. Which leaves at least an hour.